People often said the imperial harem was the most dazzling place under heaven. A place where countless palace beauties gathered, where vermilion towers and jade halls stood one after another, and where glory, wealth, and honor were beyond measure. But to me, Chen Xianyu, a 7th-rank talented lady, the harem was really nothing more than a giant birdcage. The birds trapped inside pecked one another until their heads bled, all for the sake of fighting over a single grain of millet from the keeper's hand. I was the legitimate daughter of an idle 6th-rank official at the court of imperial sacrifices. My father spent his life watching over incense offerings and recording the dates of royal rituals. His work was so relaxed that on some days, he went to the office only to drink 3 pots of tea, then strolled home with his hands clasped behind his back. Father instilled Taoist ideas in me from childhood. Xianyu, he often said, misfortune comes from the mouth and illness grows from the heart. Fight too much and you shorten your life. Scheme too much and you ruin your looks. Worry less, think less, eat well, sleep deeply, and you will surely live to 100. I considered father's words a truth worth its weight in gold. So when the imperial edict arrived selecting beauties to enter the palace, I did not cry or complain like the other young ladies. I simply picked up my bundle and calmly walked through the gates of the reception court. To me, the imperial palace was a place that provided lifelong room and board. Every month it paid a full 20 taels of silver as salary, and 3 proper savory meals with meat dishes were delivered each day without fail. As for the current emperor, Zhao Yi, he was the only master who spent money to keep me fed. As long as I behaved myself and caused no trouble, I could peacefully collect my salary here until the day I closed my eyes for good. It was the autumn equinox. A cold wind had begun slipping through the glazed roof tiles. My west pavilion sat in the most hidden corner of the imperial garden, quiet and deserted. Beneath an old osmanthus tree in full fragrant bloom, I lay sprawled across a bamboo daybed, a thin brocade blanket over me, my eyes closed as I enjoyed the morning sunlight filtering through the leaves. Talented lady, please wake up! Xiao Tao's familiar nagging voice rang out again, tearing apart the peaceful air. I cracked one eye open and saw her carrying a plate of candied jujubes. Her round face was wrinkled with worry like a steamed bun left overnight. Today is the first day of the month, she said. The other ladies have all dressed themselves up beautifully and gone to Wanshan Pavilion to admire chrysanthemums, hoping His Majesty might pass by and notice them. Look at you. His Majesty has been on the throne for 3 years, and you have been in the palace just as long. Your rank has not moved at all, and you still do not even know what His Majesty looks like. Aren't you worried that when you grow old and fall ill, our West Pavilion will have nowhere to rely on? I let out a long sigh, lazily reached out, picked up a candied jujube, and put it in my mouth. Its clean sweetness spread across my tongue, finally relaxing my tightly furrowed brows a little. Xiao Tao, I said as I chewed slowly and answered at a leisurely pace. You are making noise again. You want me to fight for favor? Look at noble consort Zhang and consort Li. They are both beauties who can topple cities, and their family backgrounds are illustrious. Every day they fight over who embroidered a better robe and who simmered better soup. One careless step and someone will put musk into an incense burner or poison into face powder. Fighting for favor is the same as shortening one's own life. I smacked my lips and patted her leg. Think about it. What is wrong with being a talented lady? My rank is not high, so no one can be bothered to watch me or harm me, but it is still high enough that the eunuchs don't dare bully me or steal my food. I don't need to exhaust myself dressing up to please anyone. During morning greetings, I can claim to be ill and avoid them, then sleep straight through until the sun is high in the sky. With a heavenly life like this, what more could you want? After hearing my twisted logic, Xiao Dao stood with her mouth open, too choked to argue. The silly girl could only stomp her foot in frustration, set the plate of candied jujubes on the small tea table, then retreat to tidy up, leaving me to close my eyes again and sink into a beautiful dream of rich, oily Sichuan roast duck. In my dream, I had just reached out to tear off a fragrant duck leg when a wave of cold air suddenly rushed over me, making me shiver. The warm sunlight on my face was blocked by a large shadow. Everything around me had gone strangely silent. Even the crickets chirping under the bushes had gone quiet. Through my drowsiness, I could vaguely feel an invisible pressure pressing heavily down on the air. I opened my sleepy eyes. The first thing that entered my sight was a stretch of fine black silk, embroidered with coiling dragon patterns in golden thread. My gaze followed the black robe and slowly moved upward. A tall, broad-shouldered man stood with his hands clasped behind his back. His face was so handsome it could stop a person in their tracks. His sharp sword-like brows were drawn tight, and his deep black eyes were lowered, coldly staring at my careless sleeping posture. That aura of looking down on the whole world, that oppressive presence, and that casual robe embroidered with hidden dragons. I did not need my father to return as a ghost and warn me in a dream. I knew perfectly well who stood before me. The current emperor, His Majesty Zhao Yi, the widely feared yet terribly diligent monarch. My heart gave a violent jump. Heavens, earth, ghosts and gods. The palace was so vast, full of artificial hills, towers and pavilions. Why had this living king of hell wandered into my miserable little corner, where even birds would not bother to nest? In that instant, my mind spun at terrifying speed. Should I pretend to faint? No. If I fainted, he would summon an imperial physician. If the physician came and took my pulse, he would prescribe bitter medicine. I hated drinking medicine the most. Should I sob delicately and say I was frightened? Even worse, I had not had time to rub onion juice on my eyes. If I could not cry and he charged me with deceiving the sovereign, my head would fall. After thinking it over, the safest method was still to follow the rules and send the guest away politely. I hurriedly sat up, hastily smoothed the wrinkles from my pale green silk skirt, and straightened the peachwood hairpin that had slipped crookedly in my hair. Then I stepped down from the daybed and gave a perfectly standard greeting, neither 1 inch too much nor 1 inch too little. This concubine of the Chen clan greets your majesty. May your majesty be safe and well. After speaking, I kept my head bowed and obediently held my posture. I hoped this monarch would dislike my rigid dullness, give a cold snort, flick his sleeves and leave. But no, he stood there, unmoving as a mountain. In truth, Zhao Yi was exhausted to the extreme at that moment. The dike in Jiangnan had burst, and the entire court was making noise while pushing responsibility onto one another. The civil officials only knew how to write tearful memorials, but none dared pack a bag, go on inspection, and supervise the repair of the dike. With a headache, he had come outside for a walk, only to run into noble consort Zhang carrying bird's nest soup and blocking his path while crying and begging favors for her younger brother. Zhao Yi was so disgusted he nearly wanted to draw his sword and kill someone. He wandered without direction and eventually found a quiet, deserted corner. There was no heavy incense here. Only the faint scent of osmanthus and a woman sleeping with her mouth open. Zhao Yi was an extremely rational man. He saw through the perfunctory nature of my greeting at a glance. He knew very well that the plain woman before him had no intention of playing hard to get or deliberately attracting his attention. Her eyes were secretly darting around, and she looked as if she wanted to yawn but had to hold it in. Clearly, she found him extremely troublesome and wanted him gone as quickly as possible. What book are you reading? Zhao Yi's low, hoarse voice sounded, carrying the breath of a man who held life and death in his hands. His long fingers pointed to the old, worn book I had just been using as a pillow. I secretly glanced at the book and answered honestly in a clear voice. Reporting to your majesty, it is treatise on water conservancy. Zhao Yi raised one brow slightly. A concubine hiding in the harem did not recite poetry, compose verses, or paint landscapes, but instead brought a dry, dull book on military-style water management to the imperial garden. Talented Lady Chen certainly has refined interests. The corner of Zhao Yi's mouth lifted into a cold, mocking smile. We are currently troubled by the broken dike in Jiangnan. None of the court officials has been able to offer a complete strategy. Since you are reading this book, do you perhaps have some brilliant advice to present to us? His words were full of mockery. He had never expected anything from an idle concubine. He merely made a casual jab to relieve the frustration in his chest. When I heard the emperor's question, I inwardly groaned. Your Majesty, are you asking me about water management? I used this book as a pillow because its paper was thick, absorbed sweat well, and was very comfortable under my neck. But if I said that directly, my head would probably be moved outside the Meridian Gate without the rest of me. If I answered, this concubine is foolish and does not know, what if he lost his temper and punished me for deceiving the ruler? If I launched into a long analysis of Jiangnan's geography, he might stand here listening all afternoon, and I would lose my precious nap. After thinking it through, the shortest road to ending this conversation was to give a ruthless but decisive solution, make him think it reasonable, and send him back to the imperial study as quickly as possible. I covered my mouth with the back of my hand, secretly gave a small yawn, then maintained a respectful but weary expression and slowly spoke. Your Majesty, the difficulty of water control in Jiangnan has never truly been the river. The difficulty lies in the human heart. The entire court is pushing responsibility around simply because going to Jiangnan is both exhausting and likely to offend the local gentry and tyrants. They all cherish their own lives. Why should your majesty waste sacred energy carefully choosing someone virtuous and capable? Zhao Yi's eyes narrowed slightly. He had not expected a concubine to dare condemn the court officials so directly. I kept my tone flat and calm, as if discussing what to eat for dinner. Your majesty only needs to issue an edict and search through the list of civil and military officials at court. Any official whose fief, ancestral temple, hometown, or relatives are located in the lower reaches of Jiangnan, near the broken section of the dike, should be appointed imperial commissioner and handed full responsibility for water control. Then add one punishment. If the Jiangnan dike breaks again and floodwaters sweep away the common people, that official will immediately be stripped of office and title, and all fields, estates, and family property will be confiscated for the treasury. Zhao Yi froze. His pupils contracted slightly. Standing before him, I gently exposed the root of human nature. Your Majesty, think about it. When a broken dike does not affect their own homes, they can remain perfectly calm and push responsibility away. But once the disaster directly threatens their ancestral graves and the glory and wealth of their own families, would they dare work carelessly? Would they dare embezzle funds meant to repair the dike? You would not even need to send anyone to supervise them. In order to protect their own property, they would naturally pour in every effort, losing sleep and appetite while urging laborers to strengthen the dike against the waves. When I finished speaking, the space beneath the osmanthus tree sank into a suffocating silence. A withered yellow osmanthus leaf drifted down onto my shoulder, but I did not dare raise my hand to brush it away. I only lowered my head patiently, waiting for this tyrant to digest my heresy and then leave. Zhao Yi stood as if carved from stone. A storm was raging in the emperor's mind. He looked at the woman before him, who appeared weak and dull. She was lazy and listless, yet the words she spoke were as sharp as a poisoned dagger, stabbing directly into the vital weakness of selfish officials. She did not use empty benevolence and righteousness to persuade them. She did not use morality to accuse them. She used their core interests and greed to bind them to responsibility. With the least laborious method, she randomly selected a person according to hometown connections, yet created the strongest possible coercive effect. This was intelligence. The intelligence of a bystander who had seen through how human interests truly worked. The gloomy heaviness that had been pressing on Zhao Yi's shoulders for several days suddenly vanished completely. The sharp cleverness hidden beneath her lazy shell made him find her endlessly interesting. Beside her, he did not have to strain his mind guarding against schemes. He could even pick up neat, effective strategies for state affairs. Zhao Yi slightly raised the corner of his mouth. His smile no longer held mockery, but a hidden appreciation. Confiscate the estates into the treasury, he said lightly. What a fine way to take the pulse of human nature. Then he lifted the hem of his black silk robe and, without the slightest courtesy, sat directly down on my bamboo daybed. He raised a hand, rubbed his temples, and calmly patted the surface of the couch. We are tired. Your strategy is very good and has helped us untie a major knot. Zhao Yi closed his eyes. His steady voice carried absolute authority, yet revealed a rare relaxation. We reward you with the honor of holding a fan and driving away mosquitoes while we take a midday nap. Until we wake, you are not allowed to make any sound. I stood with my mouth open, staring at the man who held power over the world as he grandly occupied the only sleeping spot in my shaded courtyard. What honor! I screamed inside my shattered heart. I spent effort and energy offering a clever plan. You refuse to reward me with gold, silver, jewels, or treasure, and instead make me serve you while you nap? Exploiting tyrant, ungrateful employer. If I had known, I would have kept my mouth shut and pretended to be stupid. Although I was cursing 18 generations of the Zhao ancestors 1,000 times in my belly, I was, after all, a lowly concubine with neither power nor voice, so I swallowed bitterness and endured it. I dragged over a small red sandalwood stool and sat beside him. Then I picked up a palm leaf fan and mechanically waved cool air over him. The autumn wind blew softly, mingling with the faint fragrance of osmanthus. Zhao Yi had long suffered from severe insomnia. No matter how lightly palace maids moved or how softly they spoke while attending him, he still felt irritated. Yet strangely, lying on this old daybed in this deserted courtyard, listening to the somewhat resigned rustle of my fan, his breathing gradually became even. Within the time it took half an incense stick to burn, the infamous tyrant sank into the deepest and calmest sleep he had enjoyed since ascending the throne. As I fanned him, I gave a wronged yawn and silently prayed to heaven and Buddha that this bully would sleep quickly, and then hurry back to the imperial study to govern the country and bring peace to the realm. Returning this peaceful courtyard to me, its resident salted fish. But man proposes, heaven disposes. I did not know that the moment Zhao Yi closed his eyes and slept soundly beneath the rhythm of my fan, my days of eating, lying around, collecting salary, and waiting for death had officially ended. Ever since that fateful day when I offered the clever plan to repair the Jiangnan dike, and was forcibly recruited as a maid to fan the emperor, I had assumed that after Zhao Yi woke up, he would reward me with a few hundred taels of silver, and then leave straight for the imperial study. Who knew that heaven truly had no eyes for the lazy? 3 days later, the sun had already climbed high. I was still sleeping warmly in my soft bed, covered with a floral quilt and deep in a beautiful dream, when Xiao Dao rushed in and kicked the door open. She nearly flew across the room, grabbed my blanket, and dragged it away. "Talented lady, wake up quickly. His Majesty is here." He brought a whole mountain of memorials with him. I crawled up in a daze, my hair a mess like a crow's nest. What greeted my eyes was not the romantic scene from storybooks of a monarch arriving to turn over a name tablet and summon a woman to bed. Instead, it was Zhao Yi dressed in majestic court robes, followed by eunuch Li, carrying a towering stack of memorials. They calmly walked into the main hall of the West Pavilion, swept my flower vase and tea stand to one side, and piled the memorials onto the only red sandalwood table in the courtyard. Zhao Yi sat down in the host's seat, glanced at my disheveled and bewildered appearance, and said lightly, "We have discovered that the imperial study has been too noisy lately. One moment, ministers are submitting memorials and weeping. The next, concubines are carrying soup and waiting outside the door. Your place is remote and cold. Even birds flying past are too lazy to sing. It is extremely quiet. From now on, we will borrow the West Pavilion as a place to review memorials. Go wash your face and bring us a cup of tea." When I heard this, it was like thunder striking beside my ear. Inside, I wailed in misery. "Your Majesty, this whole palace is your home. Can't you sit anywhere you want? Why must you move this entire headache-inducing pile of work into my shabby courtyard? If you sit here, how am I supposed to put my feet on the table and snack? How am I supposed to sleep during the day?" Outwardly, however, I only dared swallow my tears. I dragged my ruined body away to wash my face, then told Xiao Tao to withdraw while I personally went to the small kitchen to prepare tea and snacks. A moment later, I walked out carrying a wooden tray. Before the emperor, who was bent over the memorials, I placed a cup of clear water and a plate of baked cakes made from coarse wheat flour. Zhao Yi picked up the cup and had only lifted it to his mouth when his sharp brows drew tightly together. He looked up, his cold gaze fixed on me. "Boiled water that has gone cold? Where is the Longjing tea from last year that the Imperial Household Department sent you? And what are these cakes, hard as stones? Are you trying to break our teeth?" I stood with my hands folded and blinked innocently, putting on the most sincere expression I could manage. "May your Majesty clearly perceive the truth. The Longjing tea is still untouched in the cabinet, but brewing tea requires lighting a charcoal stove, boiling water properly, rinsing cups, and judging the heat. It is very troublesome. This concubine was born clumsy. If I brewed the tea too bitter and spoiled your Majesty's sacred mood, my crime would deserve 10,000 deaths. It would be better for your Majesty to drink cooled boiled water. It clears heat, removes toxins, and prevents insomnia." I pointed at the plate of baked cakes and added, "As for these cakes, they are hard but they keep for a long time and do not spoil easily. Chewing them also strengthens the jaw. Your Majesty works hard handling state affairs. One bite is guaranteed to refresh the mind and drive away sleep." Beside him, eunuch Li's face turned bloodless. His legs trembled, afraid the emperor would fly into a rage and behead this reckless lowly woman. But Zhao Yi only stared at me speechlessly. He was an extremely rational person. From one listen, he knew perfectly well that I was not afraid of brewing poor tea. I was simply too lazy to light the stove and boil water. He was the son of heaven, the ruler who shook the world. Yet when he came to a concubine's residence, he was served cold water and dry cakes only because she was lazy. The air was stretched tight as a bowstring. Then Zhao Yi gave a cold snort. He did not get angry, nor did he punish me. He calmly took a sip of cold water, then picked up the rock-hard cake and bit into it with a crack. "You dare cut corners with imperial provisions and still argue?" he judged lightly, then lowered his head and continued reviewing memorials, paying me no further attention. I stood there, utterly stunned. What was wrong with this tyrant? He had jade halls and rare delicacies to enjoy, yet insisted on squeezing himself into my place to gnaw on hardship rations. Only later did I understand. To Zhao Yi, a cup of cold water and a dry cake, when unaccompanied by women fighting for favor, people spying on his intentions, or hidden poison in the food, were the safest and most peaceful delicacies he could find in this deep palace. From then on, the West Pavilion became Zhao Yi's second office. He and I kept to our own sides and did not interfere with each other. He sat in the main hall, wielding his brush. I lay beneath the eaves, enjoying the breeze. In the 11th month, winter began. Recently, another storm had risen at court. Local officials had colluded to embezzle state funds, but their actions were extremely refined, and they covered for one another. Imperial censors were sent to investigate again and again, but each returned empty-handed. For the past few days, Zhao Yi had sat in the West Pavilion, reviewing memorials with a face so dark that even passing birds might be frightened to death. The suffocating atmosphere was so oppressive that it woke me from sleep. At noon, Xiao Dao secretly bribed a kitchen eunuch and brought me back a golden, fragrant roast chicken. Happily, I sat down on the stone steps, tore off a fat chicken leg, opened my mouth and bit into it deeply. Oil seeped out, and the rich flavor awakened every sense in my body. What could be more perfect in life than eating meat? I was chewing with great satisfaction when I suddenly felt a cold beam of murderous air shining straight onto the top of my head. I looked up. Zhao Yi had appeared at the entrance of the main hall without my noticing. He stood with his hands behind his back, his dark eyes fixed on the chicken leg in my hand. For 2 days, he had been so troubled by the corruption case that he had no appetite. The imperial kitchen had sent up bland, tasteless dishes, and he could not be bothered to touch his chopsticks. Now, smelling this ordinary roast chicken, his stomach was probably protesting. Under the emperor's oppressive stare, I swallowed the mouthful of chicken with a gulp. As his subject, secretly eating alone in front of the monarch was practically the crime of deceiving the ruler. Gritting my teeth, I reluctantly tore the other chicken leg from the plate and held it toward him with an expression I believed was full of respect and filial devotion. Your Majesty, would you like to taste a little? This chicken is oily and common, but perhaps Your Majesty is not used to eating such things? This concubine can put it away. Before I could pull my hand back, Zhao Yi strode over and directly snatched the chicken leg from me. He lifted the hem of his dragon robe, without preserving even a shred of imperial dignity, and sat down on the stone step beside me. Then he raised the chicken leg and took a large bite. I stared at him, wide-eyed. Damn it. You lack neither rare delicacies nor fine food. Why must you steal food from a poor talented lady like me? As Zhao Yi chewed the chicken, his brows remained tightly furrowed, as if even good food could not disperse the anger in his heart. He muttered, "Those damned officials. The Jinan authorities embezzled military grain, but everyone from top to bottom is covering for everyone else. The account books are falsified without the slightest flaw. Sending censors to investigate is useless. Those sewer rats have hidden their tails too well." I was still biting into a chicken wing. Hearing him complain, I clicked my tongue. He had brought state affairs out again and ruined my good meal. Your Majesty, why waste travel expenses sending censors to investigate? I answered lazily, casually tossing a chicken bone to the mongrel dog in the courtyard. Since they have agreed to cover for one another, sending a censor there will only be like watching flowers from horseback. Zhao Yi turned to look at me, a light flashing in his eyes. Do you have another brilliant idea? I wiped the grease from my fingers onto a silk handkerchief and said at leisure, those officials cover for one another because of shared interests. They are all in the same boat, so of course no one will break his own rice bowl. If Your Majesty wants to break their alliance, you must create an even greater interest. I narrowed my eyes and lightly tossed out a sentence. Your Majesty can issue a secret edict encouraging the officials in Jinan Prefecture to report one another. Anyone who provides solid evidence against a corrupt official will not only be exempt from collective punishment, but will also be rewarded with 30% of the property confiscated from the very household he reports. Zhao Yi froze and even forgot to chew. I curled my lips. My tone was cold yet casual. Your Majesty, think about it. In officialdom, everyone is greedy. Who would not have red eyes for money? Usually, if you ask them to betray colleagues, they fear retaliation. But if the price of betrayal is tens of thousands of legally awarded silver taels falling into their own pockets, they would dare bite and tear even their own blood brothers apart, let alone colleagues. You need not send anyone to investigate and tire yourself out. Just open the cage and throw in bait. Those starving dogs will automatically tear one another apart to claim credit. You need only sit in Tai Hall, drink tea, and wait for them to deliver the false account books themselves. The northeastern wind whistled coldly over the eaves, but the chill of the wind seemed like nothing, compared with the cold ruthlessness radiating from the strategy of a woman hidden in the harem. Zhao Yi stared at me. For the second time, a solution with the breath of the devil had aimed directly at rot and human greed. She did not use justice to punish them. She used greed to destroy greed. She walked the straightest road, spent the least effort, and forced the enemy into a hopeless dead end. He understood at once that Chen Xianyu's laziness was not stupidity. It was because she was too intelligent and too sharp. She could see through every winding, laborious detour, and from there choose the cruelest shortcut. If this intelligence had been placed in the front court, she would surely have become a powerful, treacherous minister. Placed in the harem, she became a salted fish who only loved roast chicken. Good. Very good. Zhao Yi smiled slightly. His smile was brighter and freer than ever before. He reached out and tapped my forehead with his long finger. If this head of yours had been willing to work earlier, the harem would not have been so peaceful. I clutched my forehead, pulled a long face, and moved backward. This concubine is very lazy and does not want to use her brain. It makes people age quickly. Your Majesty, have you finished eating? Return the chicken leg to me. Zhao Yi burst into loud laughter. He finished the chicken leg, wiped his mouth, and strode back toward the imperial study with the blazing momentum of a man preparing to deploy troops and hunt sewer rats. In the blink of an eye, the 12th lunar month arrived. The atmosphere in the palace became extremely tense because the Empress Dowager's 60th birthday was approaching. Throughout the 6 palaces, concubines competed to display their skills, hoping to please the Empress Dowager and also score points before the emperor. One woman stayed up all night until her eyes nearly went blind, embroidering a screen of 100 birds paying homage to the phoenix. Another spent her private savings and emptied her purse to have someone purchase a jade Pixiao talisman and a red coral bracelet. In the West Pavilion, Xiao Dao paced back and forth in the courtyard like an ant on a hot pan, crying and whining. Talented lady, what are we going to do? Your salary is only enough for meat twice a day. Where would we get money to buy rare treasures? If you embroider, you are too lazy to touch needle and thread. If you bring no gift for the Empress Dowager's birthday, you will certainly be accused of being unfilial and will never recover. I lay on the daybed and gave a lazy yawn. I looked around the quiet courtyard and my gaze stopped on a clay pot beneath the eaves. It was the pot Xiao Dao had used last month to test grow a few wheat seeds she had brought from home. Now the wheat had sprouted green and lush, about an inch tall, and looked exceedingly healthy. I snapped my fingers. Who says we have no gift? Isn't this the perfect gift? Xiao Dao followed my finger and looked over. Her face went bloodless. Talented lady, have you gone mad? You plan to offer the Empress Dowager a pot of weeds? I curved my lips. Idiot, this is not wild grass. Go wrap the pot in red paper to make it look pretty, and tie on a bow. Leave the rest to my mouth. On the day the grand birthday banquet was held in Sinning Hall, lanterns and flowers shone brilliantly, and palace music rose in delicate notes. The Empress Dowager sat in the seat of honor. Zhao Yi sat beside her, casually turning a wine cup in his hand, though his eyes held hidden coldness. He was very irritated. Recently, the national treasury had suffered a heavy deficit because of disaster relief in the north. Yet the concubines of the harem were competing to present wastefully luxurious gifts. There was noble consort Zhang's night pearl as large as a goose egg, consort Li's cloak of rare white fox fur, and countless other treasures. The choking scent of money and extravagance made a practical emperor like Zhao Yi find the whole scene extremely unpleasant. Then it was my turn, talented Lady Chen, to step forward and present my gift. Amid a forest of gold and a sea of silver, I wore a simple pale blue outfit and calmly carried forward a pot of wild grass wrapped in red paper. I knelt respectfully. This concubine of the Chen clan respectfully wishes the Empress Dowager boundless longevity, as vast as heaven. Sinning Hall instantly fell silent. Then whispers and barely suppressed laughter began rising from the tables of the concubines. Noble consort Zhang curled her lips and could not help mocking me. Talented Lady Chen, even if your West Pavilion is poor, you cannot bring a pot of roadside weeds here to humiliate the Empress Dowager. How bold of you. The Empress Dowager frowned, clearly displeased as well. From the high platform, Zhao Yi's sharp gaze swept over the pot in my hands. He had intended to speak and help me out, but then he saw the faint, confident smile at the corner of my mouth. He decided to sit still and watch the show. Calmly, I kowtowed once. My clear, ringing voice sounded throughout the great hall. Reporting to the Empress Dowager and Your Majesty, this is not wild grass. It is young wheat that this concubine personally sowed and watered day and night with clean spring water. I raised my eyes, my expression solemn and devout. This year, the north has suffered both drought and floods. The people are in hardship. When the country is in difficulty, no matter how bright pearls and jade may shine, they cannot turn into bowls of rice to save hungry people. This pot of green young wheat symbolizes growth and abundance. It is a prayer for a bountiful harvest and for the common people to have warm clothes and full bellies. This concubine knows that the Empress Dowager has a compassionate heart like a bodhisattva, eats vegetarian meals, chants Buddha's name, and prays daily for the rivers and mountains. This simple gift represents the people under heaven and offers the most sincere heart, perfectly matching your grace's kindness and concern for all people. A perfect speech transformed my extreme poverty into national righteousness and transformed my laziness about embroidery into concern for the common people. Signing hall became silent again, but this time, no one dared laugh. The concubines' faces turned pale. They realized their expensive gifts had suddenly become the crime of luxurious waste. After hearing my words, the Empress Dowager's eyes brightened, and she was deeply moved. She herself had come from a farming family, and my words struck straight into her heart. Good, very good. The Empress Dowager clapped and smiled kindly. Talented Lady Chen understands the greater good and the hardships of the people. I like your gift very much. Leave the jewels and jade behind. Bring this pot of wheat here and place it on my table so I may look at it. Beside her, Zhao Yi's lips curved into a beautiful line. His gaze on me was full of appreciation and amusement. This salted fish was not only lazy to an almost supernatural degree, her mouth could also turn weeds into a sacred object. Seizing the opportunity, Zhao Yi stood and swept his cold gaze over the pale-faced concubines. Talented Lady Chen is right. The world lacks food, yet the harem indulges in luxury and waste. Starting tomorrow, the clothing and jewelry expenses of the 6 palaces will be cut in half. The saved funds will be transferred into the disaster relief treasury. Anyone with objections may look at the Empress Dowager's wheat and learn from it. Your Majesty is wise. The concubines had no choice but to grit their teeth, kowtow, and give thanks while silently weeping inside. I returned to my seat and secretly cheered. 1 arrow, 3 targets. I had not spent a single copper coin, had completed the task, and had also helped Zhao Yi find a reason to cut harem expenses. It was the highest return, lowest capital investment in history. But I did not know that the young emperor's hawk-sharp gaze on the high platform had already locked onto me. He realized that this unpolished jade named Chen Xianyu absolutely could not be allowed to keep lying around under the eaves cracking melon seeds forever. It was time to drag this salted fish out to do greater work. In another blink, the north wind swept in, announcing that a harsh winter had descended upon the capital. To me, winter was the best season to practice the bear's principle of hibernation. As long as I curled up in a cotton quilt with a small brazier beside me, I could sleep from dawn until sunset. But my peace was once again disturbed by that tyrant Zhao Yi. Recently, the Imperial Household Department had begun distributing heating charcoal to the palaces. According to the rules, a noble consort received 60 caddies per day, a consort received 50 caddies, and a talented lady like me received only 15 caddies. This was originally quite normal, but the women in the harem still found an excuse to make trouble. One complained that her charcoal allotment was short in weight, another wept that her bedroom faced the wind and therefore needed a larger share. Day after day, they dragged themselves to the imperial study, pressing silk handkerchiefs to tearful eyes, while complaining to Zhao Yi that the imperial household department was stealing from them, and that sisters in other palaces were bullying them. Zhao Yi already had a headache over the shortage of military grain at the border. Now, because of a few lumps of charcoal, he had to endure sobs and grievances until he was irritated to the extreme. With a face black as the bottom of a pot, he flicked his sleeves, left the imperial study, and followed the familiar road straight to my west pavilion to take refuge. When he walked in, I was curled beneath a thick quilt on the daybed, lazily chewing roasted sunflower seeds. You truly are leisurely. Zhao Yi snorted coldly, sat down on the chair opposite me, and casually grabbed a handful of my seeds. Outside, it is as noisy as a broken market. Everyone is crying that they are freezing, yet you are fine. 15 caddies of charcoal a day, and you are still this comfortable. I glanced at him and answered with my mouth full of seeds. Your Majesty, 15 caddies of charcoal is enough to warm one small room. The other ladies complain of cold, because even in freezing winter, they still like wearing thin silk skirts with exposed necks and arms to show off their figures while waiting for your Majesty to visit. If they want beauty, they must endure cold. Blaming the Imperial Household Department for giving too little charcoal is truly unreasonable. Zhao Yi froze. He was a man. Every day he wore a tightly wrapped dragon robe. How could he understand the minds of women who valued fashion over weather? Hearing me expose the truth, he slapped his hand hard on the table. Ridiculous. We are busy with endless state affairs, yet must worry over a few baskets of charcoal for them. Seeing the exasperated face of the emperor, I sighed. If he did not solve this matter, he would surely come to the West Pavilion every day to make trouble, seriously harming the quality of my sleep. Your Majesty, I said, propping my chin up, wearily, this is as easy to solve as turning over a hand. Simply issue an edict converting each palace's full charcoal quota into silver. Every month, pay the silver directly to each person. Whatever palace it is, that palace can take the money and buy charcoal from the Imperial Household Department itself. Zhao Yi raised a brow. Pay it as silver? I nodded and analyzed it with the thinking of someone afraid of trouble. Exactly. Once it is converted to silver, anyone afraid of cold can take her silver and buy more charcoal to burn. Anyone who can endure cold or wear a few more padded clothes can save the money and keep it for herself. Your Majesty, think about it. Once money enters their own pockets, they will naturally know how to calculate profit and loss. Those who are greedy for money will burn less charcoal. Those who use more charcoal will pay from their own pockets. The Imperial Household Department will no longer be accused of stealing, and no one will have an excuse to run to you crying about unfair distribution. Settle it with one contract, and both Your Majesty and the world can rest easier. After hearing this, Zhao Yi's deep eyes flashed with a bright light. He looked at me as if looking at a 1,000-year-old fox spirit disguised as a lazy pig. With one move, turning physical supplies into silver, and giving individuals the right to decide for themselves. She had immediately silenced every complaint and eliminated the corruption loophole in the Imperial Household Department. This method of management was sharp, clean, and struck directly at human greed. If it had not come from a lazy person who only wanted to solve the matter quickly so she could sleep, it would truly have been frightening. Xian Yu. Zhao Yi unconsciously called my name, the corner of his mouth lifting into a meaningful smile. You are this lazy. Why does your mind turn so quickly? I yawned and pulled the quilt over my head. Because lazy people always know how to find the shortest road so they do not have to work. Your Majesty, since you have a method now, hurry back and issue the edict. Do not disturb this concubine's sleep. Zhao Yi was not angry. On the contrary, he laughed freely. He rose and, with a mood as light as if a 1,000-pound burden had just been set down, strode back to the Imperial study. Sure enough, the next day, the edict converting charcoal into silver was issued. The 6 palaces instantly went quiet, and no more crying dared sound. After the matter of the wheat pot at the Empress Dowager's birthday banquet and the charcoal distribution strategy, His Majesty's favor toward the West Pavilion became a thorn in many people's eyes. Although I had never once been summoned to serve him in bed, the fact that the Emperor came to the West Pavilion every day and closed the doors to discuss matters. In reality, he reviewed memorials while I cracked melon seeds, directly threatened noble consort Zhang's position. The darkness of the Deep Palace began stretching its claws toward me, but they did not understand that using schemes against a lazy person could sometimes lead to extremely unpredictable results. That morning I was sitting before the mirror combing my hair when Xiao Tao's piercing scream sounded from the courtyard. She stumbled and tumbled into the room, her face pale, her whole body trembling like a frightened animal. Talented lady, we are dead, truly dead, Xiao Tao sobbed, tears streaming down her face. I frowned and irritably put down the comb. Why are you making such noise? Has the sky collapsed? Xiao Tao shakily raised both hands, which were covered in mud. In her hands was a rough cloth doll about the size of a palm. The doll's belly had been stabbed full of sewing needles, and a piece of paper with the current emperor's birth date and 8-character horoscope was pasted on its back. I narrowed my eyes. Wasn't this a witchcraft doll, the most terrifying forbidden object in the palace? This servant went to loosen the soil for your orchid pot and dug this up hidden at the bottom, Xiao Tao choked out. Talented lady, someone wants to frame us for treason. Cursing the emperor with witchcraft means extermination of the 9 clans. What do we do? Should we burn it quickly or throw it into a well? In the storybooks I had read, when a concubine discovered a cursed object in her palace, she would either panic and destroy the evidence, or turn the scheme against the schemer, secretly investigate who had hidden it, and then expose that person's true face before the emperor in a grand, tearful drama. But I was Chen Xianyu. I hated trouble extremely. Investigating and interrogating? How much brainpower would that take? And would I have to lurk around in the dead of night? Such a thing did not fit my life philosophy at all. Besides, of all places this damned doll could have been buried, it had to be buried in the sword orchid pot I had carefully watered for so long. I stepped forward and snatched the mud-reeking doll from Xiao Tao's hands. My eyes turned cold as I looked at the cloth covering the doll. I immediately recognized the hidden embroidery stitches sewn with top-grade gold thread, the kind of thread the Imperial Household Department supplied only to concubines of the rank of Imperial Concubine and above. Why burn it? This is evidence. I sneered and lifted the doll by the neck. Go, bring the ruined orchid pot. Follow me to the Imperial study. Xiao Dao was so frightened she nearly fainted. Talented lady, you are mad. If you take this to His Majesty, he will behead us immediately. I shot her a glare. Shut up and follow me. If I don't get justice for my orchid today, my surname is not Chen. In the Imperial study, Zhao Yi was frowning while listening to the Minister of Justice report on a salt corruption case. Suddenly, the doors of the hall were flung wide open. Without waiting for the eunuch to announce me, I stormed inside, one hand carrying the mud-covered cursed doll, the other pointing at the withered orchid pot in Xiao Tao's arms as I walked straight to the Imperial desk. Several ministers saw me barge in and were just about to scold a concubine for breaching etiquette, but when they clearly saw the needle-stabbed doll in my hand, they were so terrified that they retreated 3 steps, fell to their knees, and shouted for the Emperor's protection. Zhao Yi raised a brow. He did not panic at all, only looked at me calmly. Xianyu, what are you doing? Without a word, I stepped forward and threw the mud-covered doll onto his carved sandalwood desk with dragon patterns dirtying one corner of the memorials. Your Majesty, look for yourself. I spoke angrily and did not even bother to salute. This concubine does not know which overfed idler secretly slipped into my west pavilion and buried this filthy broken toy in my sword orchid pot. It caused the roots to rot and all the flowers to fall. Look. The gold thread used to sew this doll is a top-grade tribute from Suzhou. In my west pavilion, even the rags are not made of cloth this good. I pointed directly at the cursed doll and demanded payment loudly. You are the ruler of the world and the master of this palace. Someone used supplies from the Imperial Household Department to damage my property. You are responsible for investigating this clearly. Find out who did it, and have that person compensate me with a brand new sword orchid twice the size of the old one. Also, this matter made me lose an entire morning of sleep. This concubine takes her leave to make up for it. After speaking, I turned and walked decisively out of the Imperial study, leaving behind ministers and eunuchs with their mouths open as if petrified. They were completely stunned. That was a witchcraft doll, a grave crime of treason punishable by extermination of 9 clans. Yet this talented Lady Chen had dared carry it in, slam it onto the Emperor's desk, and scold him, all because it had ruined the roots of a potted plant. She even openly demanded that the Emperor make the culprit pay her for the flower. What exactly was this woman's brain made of? Zhao Yi sat on the throne and looked at the mud-stained doll on the desk, then at my decisive back disappearing beyond the doors. The corners of the cold monarch's mouth slowly curved upward. In the end, he could not help letting out a deep, thoroughly delighted laugh. The sound of his laughter echoed through the Imperial study, making the ministers even more frightened. Who was Zhao Yi? He was the sharpest alpha wolf. With one glance, he understood that this was a cheap frame-up from the harem. If it had been any other concubine, she would certainly have panicked and destroyed the evidence, or devised a counter-scheme. But Xianyu did not. She was too lazy to play detective. She directly took the straightest, roughest road, and threw the evidence in the face of the person with the highest authority, asking him to solve it. This action showed her innocence and lack of guilt, exposed the stupidity of the mastermind, and remained perfectly true to the nature of a genuine salted fish who cared more about her flower pot than witchcraft. Eunuch Li. Zhao Yi withdrew his smile. A cold killing intent flashed through his eyes. Pass our order to the Imperial Justice Bureau. Use the material of this gold thread to investigate all 6 palaces. We want to know who is tired of living, dared dirty our Imperial study, and also killed talented Lady Chen's orchid. Eunuch Li accepted the order, cold sweat soaking his back. 3 days later, the Imperial edict came down. Noble consort Zhang was found to be the mastermind. She was stripped of her title, demoted to an attendant, banished to the cold palace, and never to be pardoned. The harem was shaken. Zhao Yi also seized the chance to uproot the Zhang family's power in the front court completely. However, another imperial edict was also delivered to my west pavilion. Talented Lady Chen had lost decorum before the imperial countenance, shouted loudly in the court and spoken disrespectfully. Therefore, she was punished with 1 month of confinement in the west pavilion, half a month's salary deducted, and ordered to close her doors and reflect on her faults. The concubines had just been delighted that noble consort Zhang had fallen, and now they rejoiced even more because I had been punished. They mocked me, saying I was truly stupid to take a witchcraft doll to frighten the emperor, and that confinement was already a light punishment. But they did not know that when I received the edict, I nearly cried from happiness. Heavens! What did 1 month of confinement mean? It meant that for 1 whole month, I did not have to force myself to go out and greet the Empress Dowager. No one was allowed to disturb me. I could close the gates of the West Pavilion and sleep from morning until night, then from night until morning, without violating a single rule. As for the nominal punishment of confinement, it was actually a method Zhao Yi deliberately created to protect me from the brunt of public opinion and the revenge of the remaining Zhang family forces during this sensitive period. He deducted half a month's salary from me, but that very evening, Eunuch Lise secretly carried 5 chests of jewels and silk to the side gate of the West Pavilion, along with several of the finest sword orchids selected from the Imperial Garden. Looking at the pile of compensation gifts, I hugged a pot of orchids and smiled until my eyes narrowed. Living in the harem, as long as one understood the principle that the straight road was the shortest road, even a tyrant could become one's strongest protective talisman. In the spring of the 4th year of Qingdao, peach blossoms bloomed all across the Imperial Garden, scattering the coldness of the harsh winter. Noble consort Zhang had been banished to the cold palace, the powerful in-law faction had been uprooted, and the front court and harem were temporarily calm, but that peace did not last long. The position of empress had been vacant for 3 years, and now the harem was like a snake that had lost its head. The Empress Dowager and all the civil and military officials began to grow restless. Day after day they submitted memorials begging Zhao Yi to establish an empress quickly, stabilize the 6 palaces and secure heirs for the dynasty. Of course, behind those memorials full of moral reasoning were the calculations of great families who wanted to place their daughters beside him and seize power. Facing a mountain of memorials pressuring him into marriage, Zhao Yi's expression grew darker by the day. He was an extremely rational emperor. He understood perfectly well that making the daughter of any faction empress would mean allowing imperial in-laws to run wild. He needed an empress intelligent enough to manage the 6 palaces and sharp enough to extinguish petty schemes, while at the same time indifferent to fame and profit, with absolutely no ambition to form cliques. Where, in this deep palace, could he find such a ridiculously contradictory woman? Zhao Yi rubbed the space between his throbbing brows. His gaze accidentally drifted past the quiet courtyard of the West Pavilion. A lazy figure leisurely cracking melon seeds beneath the eaves suddenly appeared in his mind. Zhao Yi's thin lips curved slightly. He abruptly stood, picked up an imperial edict written on yellow silk and wrapped around a jade scroll rod, and strode firmly straight toward the West Pavilion. When Zhao Yi walked in, I was closing my eyes and enjoying the spring breeze, drowsily calculating what dishes the imperial kitchen would deliver for dinner. Suddenly, a heavy, bright yellow imperial edict landed with a thud right in the middle of my plate of melon seeds. Startled, I opened my eyes. Zhao Yi stood against the light, his dragon robe fluttering, his deep eyes fixed on me. "Receive the edict," he said lightly. "The Imperial Astronomical Bureau has chosen an auspicious date at the beginning of summer. We have decided to establish you as empress and grant you the Phoenix Seal, making you head of the 6 palaces." Thud. The plate of melon seeds in my hand fell straight to the ground. My mind stalled for 5 seconds. Then, frightened and flustered, I rolled off the daybed, knelt down, clutched his leg tightly, and wailed miserably. "Your Majesty, spare my life. What wrong has this concubine committed for your Majesty to punish me so cruelly?" Zhao Yi froze. Since ancient times, when a woman heard she was to be made empress, if she did not faint from joy, she would at least thank him with tears. Only this salted fish of his screamed as if she were about to be dragged to the Meridian Gate and beheaded. "Being empress means becoming mother of the nation and enjoying the highest glory," he said, with a frown and a deep voice. "What are you complaining about?" I raised my tearful face and looked at him, pouring out my suffering. "What glory? Being empress is a job that squeezes every drop of labor from a person. Before the rooster even crows, one must rise on time to receive the concubine's morning greetings. Every day, one must listen to dozens of women complain, quarrel, and settle disputes. At the end of every month, one must burn lamps, wear oneself thin, and calculate the expense accounts of the imperial household department. This concubine would rather be a small talented lady, eating well and waiting peacefully for death, than carry the title of mother of the nation and exhaust herself into shortening her life." After listening to my long speech, Zhao Yi was not angry. Instead, he laughed. He bent down, helped me stand, and brushed dust from my sleeves. He already understood my nature, lazy and afraid of trouble to an extreme degree. He looked directly into my eyes and slowly offered a fair set of conditions. sort only a clear-eyed and practical emperor could think of.
仙女,
Listen carefully. We know you are lazy, but we need your sharp mind to keep this harem peaceful. Become our empress, and from now on, the rules of the 6 palaces will be decided by you. He raised one finger. First, if you hate waking early, issue an order abolishing the morning greeting rule. If anyone dares approach your palace and disturb you, simply close the doors and refuse to see them. He raised a second finger. Second, you hate looking over accounts. Good, then contract all income and expenses to the matrons of the Imperial Household Department. At the end of each month, you only need to use your sharpness to skim one summary report. If anyone dares embezzle or steal, seize that person and execute them as a warning to the rest. After speaking, he curved his lips and leaned close to my ear, his voice carrying the irresistible charm of a ruler. As Empress, you will receive the highest salary under heaven and live in the largest and warmest palace. With the Phoenix seal in your hands, no one will dare harm you, poison you, or scheme against you again. You will be able to protect your sleep forever. In exchange, you only need to suppress those noisy concubines for us, occasionally offer us a few clever strategies for court affairs, and leave half of the softest bed for us to come eat and sleep beside you. Hearing this, my eyes lit up like torches. The right to decide my own sleeping hours. No need to face noisy concubines. Work contracted completely to subordinates, while I only collected a high salary and enjoyed absolute protection. On top of that, a handsome, wealthy emperor would voluntarily submit himself as my roommate. The pros and cons scale in my mind instantly tipped hard toward the word agree. This deal was too profitable. Refusing it would make me a fool. I immediately withdrew my wronged expression, decisively picked up the yellow imperial edict, and smiled brightly. Your Majesty must keep your word. This concubine accepts the position. Zhao Yi burst into hearty laughter. His delighted laughter echoed through the West Pavilion. He reached out and gently tapped my forehead with indulgent amusement. On the day of the Grand Empress investiture ceremony, I, Chen Xianyu, officially stepped onto the highest seat of the harem. The very next day, the first decree I issued stunned the entire palace. All morning greeting rituals were abolished. Anyone who violated the rule and disturbed the Empress's sleep would immediately be punished by copying Buddhist scriptures for 1 month. The accounts of the 6 palaces were fully contracted to the Imperial Household Department. If even one coin went missing, the person in charge would compensate tenfold. Using methods of delegation and process reduction that were extremely lazy yet sharp, I quickly, ruthlessly, and efficiently rebuilt order in the harem. Without morning greetings, the concubines lost their chance to gather and jab at one another. The harem suddenly became strangely peaceful. From then on, Great Qi had the strangest imperial couple in history. Emperor Zhao Yi still diligently reviewed memorials and handled state affairs, but his insomnia and headaches disappeared completely. As for me, Chen Xianyu, though I was mother of the nation, I retained my salted fish nature. Day after day, I sprawled on a soft couch cracking melon seeds. Every so often, I used the thinking of a lazy person to toss my husband a few clever strategies for governing the realm. In the Forbidden Palace, deep as the sea and filled with schemes and power, we found each other through practicality, understanding, and the fairest exchange. We did not need sentimental vows of mountains and seas. He willingly became my solid support, while I willingly used my clear-headedness to warm him. A plain, lazy life somehow held the peace and prosperity of the realm firmly in its hands.